time Neil saw the house, he felt an unease settle deep in his bones. It wasn't the peeling paint or the overgrown garden that unnerved him. It was something else, something intangible. As he and his wife, Aisha, stepped onto the porch, the wooden floor groaned beneath their feet, as if sighing in reluctant acceptance of new owners. "This is it," Aisha said, squeezing his hand, her voice filled with hope. "Our new beginning." Neil forced a smile. He wanted to believe that, after all, this move was supposed to be a fresh start, a new home, a new life, a chance to leave behind the shadows of their past. But as the real estate agent handed over the keys, Neil swore he heard something, a whisper, faint and breathy, like the dying gasp of something ancient. He turned quickly, but the agent was already walking away, and Aisha was too busy admiring the intricate carvings on the wooden door. They stepped inside, and the air felt thick, heavy, as if the house had been waiting, watching. The first night was uneventful, but by the second, the strangeness began. Neil woke in the middle of the night to a rhythmic tapping sound. At first, he thought it was a branch against the window, but when he got up to check, he saw nothing outside. The wind was still, and the branches of the nearby trees did not reach the glass. Tap, tap, tap. The sound wasn't coming from outside. It was inside the house. Aisha stirred in her sleep, murmuring something unintelligible. Neil hesitated, then followed the sound down the hallway. The darkness seemed to stretch unnaturally long, and the air smelled damp, like old wood left to rot. He reached the staircase and peered down. A shadow moved. He froze. It was barely visible in the dim light, but he could make out a Shaipa figure standing at the base of the stairs, its form blending into the blackness. His breath caught in his throat. He wanted to call out, but something in him, some deep, primal instinct, warned him to stay silent. He backed away slowly, his pulse hammering in his ears, and slipped back into bed beside Aisha, pulling the covers over them like a child hiding from the monsters in the dark. The tapping stopped. Days passed, and the incidents became more frequent. Shadows moved where they shouldn't. The air carried whispers, voices just below the threshold of understanding. One evening, Aisha was in the kitchen when she heard her name, spoken in a rasping whisper. She spun around, expecting Neil, but she was alone. "Aisha." The voice came again, closer this time. Her skin prickled. She turned toward the old wooden cabinet at the far end of the room. Slowly, she walked toward it, hand trembling as she reached for the handle. She hesitated, then yanked it open. Empty. And yet, the whispering continued now, right in her ear. She screamed. Neil rushed in, finding her pressed against the counter, her face pale. She told him what happened, but he hesitated, unwilling to accept the impossible. That night, as they lay in bed, Neil held Aisha close, whispering reassurances. But in the silence, the house whispered back. The final night came like a funeral march, slow and inevitable. Neil woke to Aisha's screams. He bolted upright and found her sitting up, eyes wide with terror, staring at the foot of the bed. A shape, blacker than the darkness around it, featureless but undeniably present. It loomed over them, its form shifting like smoke. Then, in a voice that was neither male nor female, it spoke. "You should not have come." Neil grabbed Aisha's arm, pulling her out of bed. They stumbled down the hallway, the walls seeming to stretch and warp around them. The whispers were deafening now, a chorus of voices clawing at their sanity. The front door. They could just reach the front door. But as they ran, the shadows moved, shifting to block their path. The house was alive, breathing, pulsing with a malevolent force. The air grew thick with the scent of decay, and the walls dripped with something dark, something that looked too much like blood. Neil lunged for the doorknob. His fingers grazed it, and the house swallowed them whole. The neighbors found the house empty weeks later. The furniture remained, untouched. The light still worked, but Neil and Aisha were gone. No signs of forced entry, no evidence of struggle, just an absence, as if they had never been there at all. And on quiet nights, when the wind was still, the house whispered their names. Months passed, and the house remained vacant. The real estate company, unable to sell it, eventually abandoned the listing. Yet, despite being unoccupied, neighbors often reported seeing movements in the window's dark figures gliding past, pausing as if watching. One night, a teenager named Marcus, daring himself to be brave, decided to sneak into the house with his friends. They climbed through a broken window, flashlights casting long, eerie shadows against the walls. The air was thick with a rotten stench, but what truly unsettled them was the silence that was too deep, too absolute. "Let's just look around and get out," one of his friends whispered. But as they moved deeper into the house, their flashlights flickered and the temperature dropped. A faint whisper echoed from the walls. Marcus turned, his heart pounding. A shape flickered at the edge of his vision. Then, the front door slammed shut on its own, and the house began to whisper their names. When morning arrived, Marcus's parents called the police. He and his friends never returned home. Officers searched the house, finding their abandoned flashlights on the floor, batteries drained. But of the boys, there was no trace. Rumors spread, and the house earned a new name, the House That Eats. People swore they could hear distant screams from inside its walls. Yet, no matter how long one listened, no one could ever make out the words. The whispers continued. The house waited, and one day, it would call again.